semester. So today we have Dr. Ryan Carlin joining us from DSU. We're going to learn a little bit about project-based learning. I was talking to Dr. Carlin about the context in which project-based learning shows up at Oglethorpe now. So I'm sure we'll all have questions from the FYS perspective, from the STEM 101 perspective, from the disciplinary perspective. But let's welcome our speakers.
Thank you so much, Andrew. This is the first talk I've ever given in my hometown, which is Brookhaven. So it's a real pleasure to be here with you all. Today I just want to talk a little bit about some things that I want to get us on the same page about project-based learning. I didn't actually know how much you guys would know about it and what kind of audience I'd have. So some of this is a little bit of review. Please forgive me. But then I want to talk about how it looks at Georgia State, and I think it's a little bit different than what I'm hearing here. So I think that would be a nice way to exchange ideas. And I just want to be here as someone who's thought about this a lot for you. So bring me your questions, bring me your ideas, bring me your challenges at the end. And if I feel like I'm going long, I'm just going to cut the presentation and we can go into the Q&A. So I had to define this recently. I looked up a great definition of project-based learning. It's an inquiry-based method that engages learners in knowledge construction by having them accomplish meaningful projects and develop real-world products. When I first heard this term products a long time ago, I was like, this seems a little corporate. And some of the language in this literature is a bit corporate. But I actually think that is, I've come to deal with it. So what is the pedagogical, what does it look like? Well, you're trying to get the students to with you, define a problem that they want to know the answer to ideally, and to figure out some ideas. Let's brainstorm some ideas about how to go out and solve it, and then can you somehow create prototypes that might be used for testing and finding out what sort of solutions work. And project labs can take on a very unstructured or structured structure. I think that the real project-based learning folks would love it to be totally unstructured. I find that that's maybe a little bit maybe a little in tension with my own teaching style. Maybe some of you have found this too. Too much structure would probably kill it, but not enough might actually undermine it. So what does it look like? Well, many of you have done these labs yourselves, and so you probably could recognize that there's a bit of an instructional shift. You're instead of experts or evaluators, you kind of become coaches and mentors as your students deal with solutions and come up with solutions to problems on their own. Your goal is to create an environment that is supportive of active and independent learning, and that requires you encouraging them, giving them the latitude to take chances, and it also requires that you foster trust between you and the student as well as between the students themselves, so that they're not afraid to fail, and they get multiple bites at the apple, and they get feedback, and they get to figure out solutions to their issues themselves. Again, the class it's a cooperative, collaborative environment. You're not competing so much as collaborating, and the idea here is it's I think supposed to kind of look like maybe something they might encounter in their career, where everybody's working for the same goal, and you just want to get it right. And I think that's kind of a nice thing that some of our students have talked about using in interviews as they've come out of Georgia State. And along the way, kind of backing this up, you want to focus on the process by which you go about this, getting some norms of professionalism built in. That includes things like being a good team player, but it also includes like timeliness and like, are you connecting and communicating? Don't just go dark for 3 days, And so along the way, your job, I think, here in Project Labs is to create, equitable, inclusive teamwork environments, which is, again, what people are going to find in the real world. We have pitched this at Georgia State as a way to address what the American Association of Colleges and Universities published in 2021 as a result of a survey of preparedness gaps in terms of critical skills. So graduates were leaving college, and the people that were hiring them were finding that they weren't very good in teamwork. They weren't very good in applying what they know to real-world situations. They need some help with complex problem solving, and they should better be able to connect what they learned sort of theoretically to decision making on the job. So we have pitched this as a way to really do well by our students by preparing them. And so therefore Georgia State and Oglethorpe and other institutions are moving toward this model because it actually helps students learn, and it also keeps them on campus. These have to be mission centric. They certainly are at Georgia State. We don't worry about the word retention. We actually we really put a lot into this, and this was actually created as one way to increase retention. And like you guys, other folks have incorporated this into first year experiences, and there's a general sense like that the typical gen ed curriculum is a little too stilted, a little too stodgy, and that this is a different way to go about it. So you kind of see this as a pushback against the general education that a lot of us probably came up with. And finally, institutions use it to make themselves more distinctive. I want to talk a little bit about project-based learning at Georgia State, and I think probably anywhere you go, including here, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It comes out of something. And at Georgia State, it came out of something called EPIC, which is our experiential project-based interdisciplinary curriculum. I know that you guys are working on interdisciplinary stuff here at Oglethorpe, so hopefully you'll find this interesting. This was a response to what the provost at the time, who has since gone on to greener pastures as provosts do. She put out this idea: we want to take a moonshot. How are we going to, change education at Georgia State? And one of the ways that we thought about doing this was through interdisciplinary work. And so project-based learning actually comes out of an interdisciplinary mandate. We got some funding from the Teagle Foundation starting in 2019, and we began piloting and now implementing in fall of 21. I took over in spring of 20 during the pandemic, and I'm pretty sure I would have driven my car off a cliff if it were not for this project-based lab. I'm sure you guys remember how bad that was, but I really enjoyed my lab in that time. So the EPIC program has two goals. The one is sort of improve the core experience for students, core meaning like what they get in their first and second year at state institutions in Georgia, with interdisciplinary and experiential learning, modeled on the liberal arts education. And then secondly, and relatedly, create long-term project-based learning opportunities for students like ours that didn't often get these kind of opportunities in college. So really quickly through one, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on here, but we created a bunch of other things to get interdisciplinary stuff going early and often for our students. I'm happy to come back to some of these if you want, but basically this is the backdrop against which project-based learning comes to Georgia State. And then that goal 2, we had to define what a project lab was going to look like. And so, you probably will do this yourselves. Your definition might not look anything like this. And maybe there's multiple definitions in this room. But for us, we've said, okay, project labs have to have multiple students for multiple semesters. For us. What does that look like? Well, it could be students participate at different levels. So we might have freshmen through PhD students. My own lab has freshmen through PhD students. Or students should go on in multiple semesters, developing one set of skills in their first semester, a different set of skills in their second semester, and then third and fourth, if you can go that far. A lot of this is about building in leadership skills as they go along. Learning the kind of grunt work, tech skills at the beginning, and then learning how to mentor that as they go forward. We said that our lab should be public-facing. That is, they should somehow engage with the broader community. That can be working with a non-Georgia State organization, for example, or it could be something like what I do in my lab, which is bring research that's done by students into the public debate somehow, some way. And we said that our lab should be interdisciplinary. How can they achieve that? Well, the faculty that put it together could be from different disciplines. Or I think I heard meta majors being thrown around right here at Oglethorpe. And, you could have, in the same meta major, you could have faculty coming together. Or you can always be open to students and actively recruit students from different majors. I find that I get the most random assortment of students, and it's so fun. The computer scientists and the English major are talking and collaborating in ways that neither thought were possible. So I find that quite enriching, and each of these majors kind of has these stereotypes that they bring these skills with them, and it's really rewarding. So Georgia State has currently about 10 labs. You're not going to be able to read any of this, but what I want you to see is that you have a variety of labs here. You have really problem-based labs, like how do you fix Black maternal health, right? Or how do you increase disability and access in an inclusive way across campuses which weren't really built for that, right? So you have some serious ones like that, and then you have some more academic ones. My lab's pretty academic. You have this mapping, the 10th century, 19th century London map, and then you have more, kind of broader community-based labs like the political rap database. This is a really cool database where they have a map, and it's mostly focused in Atlanta. It maps rap songs to locations and gives a description of what the political context was in which that rap was created. And then the Krog Street Tunnel picture here on mapping Atlanta is just one of the projects in that lab. It's really community-facing. So the point is, if you have a research interest, or you have a general personal passion or a problem that you kind of want to address, at least in Georgia State, you can kind of create your lab around that. Okay, so again, how do you think about leading this lab? At least for us, it comes down to kind of getting your goals and outcomes settled, figuring out how you're going to organize the lab, and then how do you go about implementing it. And so what I'd like to do today is use my own lab as a way to walk you through how I did this. Hopefully it's helpful, and it also gives me a chance to brag about my lab, which I really love. So, oh my gosh, I did not realize it was going to look like that when I put it up. My own research is about what I call executive approval. So that's prime ministers and presidents' approval ratings. This is just a thing that I research and publish on and have for a long time. And so I've got a database that I've been building for about 16 years that gets all the data in there from about 75, 80 different countries, and in a fancy way creates like a poll of polls, so that you can get a sense of how the Prime Minister of Canada is doing and compare them to other people in Canadian history or to American presidents or whatever you want to do. So that's kind of the way that I've got it oriented. Now our labs are vertically integrated, which I'll come back to, but basically it means it's driven by a professor's research agenda or passion project. I spend about the first 6 weeks getting my students kind of caught up on what it means, what studying a presidential approval means, or prime minister approval. And it's a really accessible, literature. It's kind of intuitive. They can get it pretty easily. I don't go too deep into the woods, but I want them to have something, I want them to have some background so they can see the problems and the questions and the things that might be worth analyzing. I want them to pick up some skills. The first thing I want them to do is learn how to collect data. Now, they're not filling their own surveys. They're going out and grabbing other people's surveys and putting it into our database. How do you do that? Well, it's not that hard. It's Google, but it's Google in a specific way. Then how do you take that data and make it visual? Like, how do you visualize it? This is a very, very simple graph. We use a simple software called Flourish. It's free. And my students can grab some templates that we have created and start making their own and modifying it the way they want. And then I want them to analyze that data. And so in so doing, they're going to create those public-facing products. So I say, okay, what are some things you can do with this data? And then you just turn them loose. And so one of the things that they've been doing for a couple of years is a thing called Hot or Not. And so they go out and they look at presidents or prime leaders, world leaders who have lost, the people who have lost the most support in the last month, the people who have gained the most support. And then they have to go out and they have to write it up in a very accessible way that hopefully people can grasp quite easily. Now, when they publish this online, they usually have a lot of animation, and it takes about 7 seconds to fully load. It's really cool. They also created something about tracking. They call this the predictator. Now, the predictator is tracking the approval ratings of autocrats, dictators, right? They've been messing around recently with AI. This is a fun way I have, like, low stakes way for them to learn AI. This is our own rankings based on the data we have historically of Japanese prime ministers. And we asked AI to rank them in order of popularity, and we ran the correlation. The correlation is negative and small. And so our most popular, based on our rankings, is Shinzo Abe, and he's, the least popular based on AI. So they can learn about AI and doing this and build up on their skills, and they can also create fun things. Now, it works a lot better for UK prime ministers, but I didn't want to show that. Then they get out and they put it online, right? And they never, so the students in the first semester, they didn't want to have Georgia State anywhere. They didn't want to be associated with Georgia State. In fact, the original name of the lab was the Georgia State Panther Popularity Project. They said, this is the worst name ever, Dr. Carlin. So, okay, well, you come up with a name, and they did. They wanted to get the polls and power, like real politics, and they came up with politic, and they put together the style guide. I don't know, they're crazy. They absolutely surprised me to death. But we get out there, we put it on a variety of outlets. We started with blogs. Our first blog was in the Washington Post. They had a political science blog called The Monkey Cage, which is now defunct, but our first blog was about what happens to political leaders who get COVID. Do they lose support or gain support? So that was the first thing we ever did. And we have a newsletter that we have some subscribers to. But anyway, the point is, they know it's going out, and they know that they're creating a reputation along the way. And finally, I want them to connect their experience in the lab with career opportunities. So we do trajectory talks, trying to get folks to come in and say, hey, what did you do? How did you get where you are? This guy, Miles Coleman, he's at Larry Sabato's Crystal Ball, which is like a very important political forecasting group. We've had guys people from the Economist Intelligence Unit. And these folks here are from a Spanish lab of like-minded people that are also doing their own type of lab called Politics. I think they stole it from us, but anyway, that's fine. But we learn a lot from just talking to other labs, and I think the students get a real kick out of that. And finally, this supports my own grant, my own research, as I was talking about, which is called the Executive Approval Project. And I was able to use the labs in grants to say, hey, look, this is going to support research at a minority-serving institution that is sound. It's going to have built-in structure, and we did get an NSF grant from that a couple of years ago. All right, so those are the goals and the outcomes. How are you going to set this thing up? I think that the most important decision you can make is how to build leadership into the lab. These are my students on my porch here in Brookhaven. And yes, they made t-shirts. I don't know, they're nuts. But we model ours off of what's called the vertically integrated project model, which is actually started at Georgia Tech, and then it's been exported as a model for how to do labs around the world. There's about 60 universities worldwide that subscribe to this, and they're part of this consortium at Tech. And the idea, again, is that you are building it, you have the leader with the idea, and they have students underneath them, but every semester they're gaining new skills, and they're mentoring downwards, they're learning new skills upwards, and they're mentoring downwards. And so I always find I'm always on the lookout for students who'd be great to bring into the lab. It's that student with whom you connect, and it doesn't matter what you'd be teaching, you'd probably love them, and they'd probably love you. Well, that's the person you want in your lab. You get them on your side, you say, hey, let's build this thing together. And so there's a couple of those students in that picture right now. Who are those for me? How you gotta be in touch with people? We use Slack. You can use any kind of thing like Slack if you want. How are you gonna get together? You're gonna do face-to-face? You're going to do hybrid, you want to do online, you want to do some sessions where you go hybrid if you have to be out of town, or if someone's sick, they can Slack it. See, Slack is good because it has a Zoom integration. Maybe there are others like it, but you can use Zoom to connect if you're out of town or if someone's gone. They can still connect with their team during the lab session, and it has a bunch of other functionalities for creating channels for subgroups and so forth. And then, how are you recruiting students? I mean, if you guys are using your freshman year of studies, we use something similar. We have a perspectives class. It's a 2-credit class for incoming freshmen. They sign up and they actually don't know what they're signing up for most of the time, and they show up and they're like, what are we doing in this class? So we have some kinks to work out there, but then how do you go and recruit at other levels? That's something that we have to figure out, and so do you. And then how do you get across disciplines? Or do you want only within a meta major, or do you want folks from all different groups? Can you connect to clubs on campus? I've had some success doing that with like the newspaper, or like there's a hackers club with all these computer scientists who they just love problems, They say, oh, you got a problem? Oh, I'm in, That was supposed to be a picture of my flyer, but it's not on there. And then how do you keep students engaged? How do you keep them motivated? We've done stuff. We have an undergraduate research conference. Maybe you have something similar. We're constantly like entering students in that. And say, hey, that's a cool project. Enter it to the GCirc. And then we do a showcase in the fall semesters in which we invite all the university higher-ups and all the students, and of course, offer free food and that kind of thing, and let people see what's going on. Let the labs have their own little stations, do little virtual presentations for folks. Those are some ways in which we keep students motivated. Then there's marketing. I mean, our marketing team has gone off the deep end, fully off the deep end. They've created, for an upcoming event, they've created an activity book. If you flip through this, they have like it's crazy. It's crazy now. I won't flip it. I'm kind of embarrassed, but they're having fun. So how do so you got to figure out ways to get your hooks into folks. And then finally, how are you going to assess this thing? And this is our assessment here. We did over 8 semesters. We compared students in the EPIC cohorts, so people who came in and were involved in not just project labs, but also other interdisciplinary things. We have freshman learning communities that are built around all the students taking similar classes, so that they have a network of folks that are all kind of going through that first year together. And we don't really see any difference kind of going in the first couple semesters, nothing really big. But by the 4th semester, we start to see students who are in the EPIC labs and other programs really starting to stick around in college longer than people like the overall incoming cohort on average. And then we did a matched control group here in the gray, and over 8 semesters, they're almost double. They're like 60% higher than their matched cohort. So we think it works, but the point is not that we're great. It's just that if you want to go beyond where you are now, you might think about how you're going to assess this thing. Sustaining the lab, and this is the hard thing. How do you get something to go on for multiple semesters? How are you going to structure that? We're creating a certificate program, a certificate of project-based learning. Because at least at Georgia State, there's an interest in like people getting certificates and credentials, as they call it. How are you going to? Where are these credits going to fit in your curriculum? Maybe there's obvious places for them. Maybe there's not. Who's going to get credit for these? Is it going to departments? Is it going to faculty members? Is it going to the college? Is it going into nothingness? How do you have professors here like you? How do you get credit for this in your workload? thought about some different models for that. For example, but it's almost department by department. It'd be nice to have a standard model where it's like, well, if you teach 2 of these, you get 1 course, which is basically what I've worked out with my chair. It makes it a little bit more work on my end, but it's worth it for me. And then finally, you'll ask yourself, well, how are we going to scale this? How far do we want to scale it? Do we want it only in the first year? Want it beyond? What's it going to look like beyond? What percentage of our faculty we want involved in this? So those are kind of the big questions in terms of taking this institutionally beyond Georgia State. Everybody's going to have to confront, I think, these questions. And so I'm going to leave it there, and I look forward to engaging with you on this on these topics and others related to it.
So if the project starts like in the first year, is it tied to courses as they move through, or are they just simply tied to the project without a course attachment? Does that make sense?
Well, we have it structured. Our first year requirements, you don't have to take them in their first year, but usually most students do. There's a perspective 2002 and 2003, and we usually have the labs create sections of perspectives, both perspectives courses, so students can take it in back-to-back semesters and get credit for their institute, like their these perspective hours, which are part of their university requirements. Mm-hmm. If they want to go beyond that, then it's like, where do you build the credits? Are they in a major? Are they under the college in which they're maybe accruing to something like a certificate, or they're fitting in as electives? So you have to create courses beyond that first year, I think, in order to sustain it. I don't think relying on volunteers is not good. So get a student registered, get them paying, get them worried about what it's going to look like on their transcript, and I think that's the better way to do it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking in terms of like the different, I guess, spaces that we have to work with within our institution.
Yeah.
I think it would be an interesting opportunity for the core program, because our core is kind of like a general ed, but it's kind of more for the liberal arts model. And so I'm just thinking like how we could connect that.
Yeah. I think there should be ways. I mean, is it a 2-year thing or a 1-year thing?
So we have our first year seminar, which is the first semester that they come in, but then we have the core program, which they're supposed to be taking probably each semester, at least.
4 years.
Yeah, all 4 years, although I was gonna say sometimes it doesn't. But
Yeah.
that's what it's supposed to be, yeah.
Ooh, that's nice. That's
Yeah.
nice to have in place. Cool. Yeah.
Our core is cohort and sequence throughout the 4 years.
Oh my goodness.
That's the general education program.
Oh wow. Okay.
Nine courses.
In all majors.
All
college.
students at the local take core 101
Okay.
and they're with other core students.
They're not in meta majors and just kind of all thrown.
Not in the core.
Okay. Cool. Interesting.
Talking about project-based learning, in your labs, you have some of the big questions from your first slides on what each lab is sort of grappling with. I'm thinking from a student perspective, are they developing their own questions of what they want to study that's important to go into that? So I'm wondering how much chance they get for picking their way into your lab.
Yeah.
Their question, what empowerment they get.
For picking their way into the lab, or once they're in the lab?
Once they're in the lab, sort of finding their own
Yeah. Yeah.
question in project-based learning.
That's great. Yeah. Great question. I mean, I'm not sure if there's one right way to do it. I basically say, here's every semester I say, here's what we've done in the past. Is there interest in folks? Sometimes there's folks that created the product last semester that they want to keep doing. And I'd say, well, okay, we want to keep these or trash it. What else should we do new? So this semester, semester, for example, we're adding a forecasting model, which we've never had before, but we need someone to take that on, and because someone was interested in it, we're adding it. Someone wanted to do AI last year, so we added AI. So, yeah, you kind of say the products are thus, you can't have 10 products and 11 students. It just doesn't work. So you have to kind of try to manage it that way. I don't know how big these cohorts are that you have coming through in your core. Are they 20 students? 15?
It's 20.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, again, it's a dance of have some leeway, but you can't go too far. Right? We've all been there. Yeah.
I'm curious about how this project-based model kind of fits in with research labs that faculty members might have been running before the project-based learning had branding.
Yeah.
Has it supplanted folks' research programs? Is it existing outside of them?
Well,
Are they taking unfundable projects and doing project-based lab with them?
So in the hard sciences, this model is totally normal. This is the way that tech figured out a way to take the hard science model and apply it to their non-hard sciences, right? So they're like, oh, we can do this. But my sense is that at least at Georgia State, we require them to be interdisciplinary in some way. Many of the labs that you have that are already existing aren't. So I'm not sure, if you want to add that here, an interdisciplinary element. And if you did, they'd probably just exist alongside other labs that are currently stood up. So some professors, that their lab is their lab, it's their baby, they don't want to change it, they've got it just how they want it, and it works to feed their research program. You probably shouldn't change it. Unless they wanted to add an interdisciplinary element to it, in which case you say, okay, well, yeah, this can come in as part of our program. We're going to give you this. One thing I didn't mention is that we usually give some supplement to get labs off the ground. Here's take $3,000 and hire a grad student for the summer, or take $2,500 and buy materials, or whatever you need. Like, let's get you going and up and running. So if someone wanted to transition from like a very narrow lab to something bigger, you could probably foster that in some way, facilitate that. I don't know if that answered your question, but
It does, yeah, and kind of the intersection there is, at least in chemistry, and I know many of my colleagues in Division 3, which is the sciences, we're often thinking about how to get all of our students a genuine research experience, and the model we find to be most successful there is embedding things in coursework. So, could you talk a little bit more about how your project lab has interacted with, supported by something that exists in the bulletin?
that exists in the bulletin.
Right, like a course that's
So, well, I think the real pedagogical wizards here would say that there's project-based learning and there's project-based project. I mean, I can't remember the words they use, but basically any course can have a project-based element to it. What we've had folks do is take, maybe they're teaching a course that constantly has like a little project at the end, or maybe half of the semester, or last third of the semester, whatever it is. They've taken that and they've blown it up into a lab. I haven't seen it go the other way. Actually, I've done it the other way. I take it back. Yeah, I take some elements of this and I use it in my master's level class, summer school class. So I kind of shoehorn the lab into a part of my coursework in the summer. I find it's good to keep the Twitter happy. You gotta keep the Twitter algorithm happy. You gotta feed it. So if you just take a break every summer, you lose 3 months of momentum. So you want people there. So I say, my summer school students, they can do some of this. So yeah, I think it can actually go both ways. Yeah. Yeah.
So you talked about your specific lab, but do all of them have some type of outward facing? Obviously, there's a partner that it's clear that's outside of the Georgia State organization. Do all of them have some outward facing? I'm asking this question because last probably around portfolios, and it just feels again there's some layering happening here. There's already some connections. So I'm curious to know.
There is a great variety of what public facing looks like in our labs. Some I'm not sure do it very much at all, besides a website. So a website, it's probably like a bare minimum of public facing. Others are going out and connecting with actual, like the rap project. They're like always talking to rappers and stuff. Anyway, so they're connected in real ways, right? I deal with my, so I guess what I'm saying is that there's a wide variety there, and I think we kind of are more interested in, I think we see, I don't know, I'm not saying we see that as a cherry on top, but it's sort of like we don't have a very high threshold for what it takes to be public facing. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but.
Well, and maybe my question wasn't asked this clearly. The idea of a portfolio or having a web presence or a presence that's accessible based on your own, the open public or it can be a set number of people as a way of recording the learning that is happening and being able to connect the learning to the growth in learning over time. Again, to maybe it's about an employer being able to document the skill sets that are learned through the project. Maybe it's about your own personal growth and development. Are you seeing that the project-based work you're doing has some of those elements in most of the projects as well?
Yeah, and in fact, as we go forward, we're trying to make this part of the new strategic plan. And to do that, we're going to actually have to figure out exactly what it's going to be, how we are going to record this. So different labs are doing it different ways. But I do know the students are taking this, they're taking elements of it to their interviews. They're coming back saying, I thought I talked about it. So we have to figure out a way, and I think you guys might want to think about it too, apparently, like, is there a portfolio that kind of everybody is putting together? Maybe it's on your course software management system or whatever it is, that you can say, okay, yeah, here's the portfolio that all these labs are kind of depositing things into. It's also a good way to, like you said, track the progress. Students can see at the end, they're like, oh, wow. Yeah.
Well, in grants, when you're talking about the NSF grant, you're gonna have some of that.
Right, that's right. Okay. No,
No, good, Fran.
Oh, okay, so, and maybe I missed this, but, it sounds like if it's gonna be part of the strategic plan, it's going to be everywhere at Georgia State, and that might require existing practice forms, or do you have enough volunteers to kind of staff enough of these labs to deliver on that kind of promise? What are the challenges there?
The challenge, thank you. That is a massive. We're kind of feel like the dog chasing the car. What if we actually catch it? Because, we would basically try to do something a little bit smaller, which is to, kind of like Andrew's office here, establish an office that has dedicated personnel that's here to help faculty get these things launched, get them sustained. Then it's a matter of how much money is going to trickle down to do this. Because what it essentially is it's workload, right? And so even in small schools, I'm sure, there's a question of how can we, what's fair? What's class size going to look like? Well, we have the same problems. And so it's going to take a big push from the provost to say, yeah, I'm going to fund this. And I don't care if that means we're teaching, a bunch of fewer credits per semester. It's worth it because this, that, and the other. So we're not sure. That's above our pay grade a little bit, but yes, it's going to require an investment.
So I had mentioned to you previously the model that we use for the FYS about how it's kind of like a start and finish within that semester. So there's like the end goal of the finished completed project. And so as you're talking about, all of these projects seem like they're kind of ongoing. And so I'm just wondering, like, what does that look like in terms of of being folded into the course? Like, what's the end goal at the end of the semester? If it's not to complete the project, I guess, are there like certain criteria that are met depending on what the project is?
Again, I think this is going to vary a lot across labs.
Mm-hmm.
Most of these are conceived as ongoing. Some of them have been really specific project-based. There is an actual endpoint. One of the labs that has come and gone set up the second floor of the National Center for Human Rights and Democracy, or National Center for Civil and Human Rights. The second floor is all international. Well, a GSU lab helped them set that up and do the research behind it. Then it's over. So, and in fact, we've told faculty members, hey, look, you can set this up as an indefinite lab, or it can be really, so I figured out a way within my own lab to say, look, everybody's got to do 2 products, and then a bunch of, earlier assignments that are data collection, data visualization. These assignments are kind of there is a syllabus. There are things they have to do by the end of the semester. But the project goes, and it keeps going. And so it can't be. The key then is like, okay, how do you get that student who did well the first semester, how do you bring them and keep them in and have them be leaders in the next semester? Sometimes you get a bunch of leaders. This semester, for example, I got very poor leadership. I got a bunch of second semester students, but not a bunch of leaders. But yeah, so anyway, you can have indefinite or kind of infinite projects. Mine's in the infinite stage. I don't know how long I can keep going, but I do like it.
So I'll go again. What do these projects look like? Because I'm thinking about our students in terms of out of class work. I know for my FYS section, at least, I tried to do everything in class because, there's the whole thing about like commuters and who lives on campus and who works and who can, get together. So are most of these projects completed like during a class time, or do you have like a time that you meet outside of class, or what does that look like?
I try to, because of the way our perspectives courses are structured, they're only two credit hours.
Okay.
So I try to have 2 hours of class time, and then students who have taken it for a second time are getting 3 hours. And I say, look, that 3rd hour, you guys are going to make up out of class, and that's going to be communicating with your teams, communicating with me, sending me drafts, kind of doing out of class work. So the freshmen or whatever, they have kind of 2 hours. It's kind of enclosed within the class period, but then beyond that, I kind of expect more. And that's where Slack is good because, you don't have to keep track of everybody's hours, but if they're not doing it, they're slacking off. Sorry, couldn't help it. But they're not. And they don't have any excuse for, I couldn't get in touch with anybody. Well, yes, you could, because we created a channel for you this semester, and I don't see you having posted in there, right? So, yeah, I do expect a little bit of outside of class work for upper level students. And again, that's their leadership. That's the skill they're building in that 2nd and 3rd semester.
Yeah, I'm thinking the more that you talk that way, it's like they're part of almost like it could be considered like club-like, right? It's like they're part of a club, and that's totally something they can put on their resume, right? I was a part of this project, and these were my roles, and yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Now I'm asking you. So, are the labs on campus here? Are they connecting to careers in a particular way, or like a thought out way, or you?
I think it depends on what you mean by labs.
I mean your project, your projects.
Sure.
I think I think it varies completely, because I know your chem labs are probably directly connected, right, with physics and things.
Yeah. I don't know, Mario, do you want to talk about how it's FYS?
So FYS, the projects that are in the FYS aren't really about connecting to careers. It's more about building community and working together on something, and that teamwork aspect. But it is just a 1 credit hour class, and so it's limited time, and it's convened within the semester. So
Yeah. With 1 hour a week, it's hard to do a whole lot.
Too much, yeah.
Have you ever put? I'm just wondering if you can do 2 hours in 1 semester. I don't know.
It's really hard because of the core curriculum, because they're in, that gen ed class, which is 4 credit hours already, and so when you've got that in the first semester, and then their major classes, adding more on top has been.
We do have one model in which this could work really well, and that is the concentration model. Right now, public health is our only concentration, but it is vocationally minded. We don't do a problem-based learning easily could fold that in there, but we do an internship, a pre-guided internship, which has the templates of this, and it works extremely well as a low-stakes exploratory option, but the kids come out with a credential. It's
business too, we have a really large business school, I don't know what yours thinking. But, I think there's lots of potential in those spaces also.
Yeah, the flip side of what you're saying is what we're doing is just creating a certificate that will go across all different, like, so people can take the credit in their certificate program. We have this rule that, because we're public, I don't know, maybe you do too, but anyway, so you can't just, they just don't, something about how the way students are funded for the Pell Grant, I believe it is, doesn't allow them to just take courses that aren't in a degree program. So the certificate is created as a way to say, oh, that's a degree program, or that's a program, so you can take courses in it and it will still be paid for. So that's another idea. I'm happy to share what we put together for that if you want to create one that's for the whole university, and it's a vehicle for having these credits accrue to something that has a credential at the end.
Thinking about gen ed and sort of low number of courses in the first year. So how has this moved out into other kinds of gen ed methodologies?
I don't think it really has. I think that is the way that it works. So I will say that the other aspect of EPIC, which is this interdisciplinary curriculum, is that the students are placed into freshman learning communities. So it's not 100% perfect, but like 50 students are kind of all taking the same 3 or 4 gen ed classes together. So some of them will get into my lab and they'll already have friends because they're already in their freshman learning communities. Oh, I didn't know you were here. So it kind of reinforces. I think you have some of that going on in your freshman year studies as well. So.
I know the difference in size between your university and ours is just boggling my mind.
I know.
I can't even imagine that this can hang together as well as you're describing it, just because we have a hard enough time with our little 1,400 group. For the cats, but.
Yeah. You have a building like that.
You have a whole sea of buildings like
I know. It's not as lovely a place to work as it is to be here on Oakland, that's for sure. Well, I'm happy to talk to